It's finally spooky season, and you know what that means. It's a perfect opportunity to talk about some creepy and obscure mysteries from the grimdark future of Warhammer 40K. From a beloved techno-archaeologist who disappeared deep beneath the surface of Mars, leaving behind only a single clue to what happened. A deeply disturbing Vox recording of his final moments. A strange species of aliens that scientists haven't been able to explain, and although originally thought to just be void-born pests, when attacked, demonstrated some truly frightening powers. And if the accounts of one particular madman are to be believed, the secret of what these things actually are is absolutely mind-blowing. We're also going to be talking about a theory that says that everything that we think we know about the warp is wrong, and how there's an area within the Sea of Souls that even the gods themselves are afraid to go to. We're going to be talking about all that and a whole lot more, but before we dive headfirst into the grimdark, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor.
Are you too busy to cook this fall but still want to make sure you're eating healthy? Then why not skip the trip to the grocery store, as well as all the chopping, prepping, and cleanup time as well, by switching to Factor, the sponsor of today's video. Their fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes and delivered right to your front door. All you have to do is heat and enjoy, then go back to crushing your goals. They have over 35 weekly flavor-packed meals to choose from that promote a healthy lifestyle and meet your meal preferences, all designed by their team of gourmet chefs with ingredients with integrity that help you feel your best all day long. I'm a huge fan of Factor, as running a YouTube studio full-time by myself doesn't really leave me with much time to cook nowadays, but I'm also a man who appreciates good food. Factor saves me time by cutting down on trips to the grocery store and is incredibly flexible. I can adjust my order size to include meals for a loved one or even skip a week if I know I have a special event coming up. They have tons of options that make sticking to my goals easy, and most importantly, their meals taste absolutely phenomenal. Head to Factor75.com or click on the link below and use code WesHammer50 to get 50% off your first box. Again, head on over to Factor75.com or click on the link below and use code WesHammer50 to get 50% off your first box. Big thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. The mysterious entities known as the Umbra. The Milky Way galaxy of the 41st millennium has no shortage of strange and bizarre Xenos life forms, most of which have either gone undocumented or the study and cataloging of is only in its infancy. Amongst them, the creatures known as the Umbra are perhaps the strangest. They appear as smooth black spheres that live within the void of space and are often attracted to areas that resonate with the warp. Voidfarers have traded tales of these things for centuries, of hundreds if not thousands of them showing up and hovering around their ships, being particularly attracted to their warp engines. For the longest time they seemed relatively harmless, and were originally viewed as just a pest. But the reality was that couldn't possibly be further from the truth. There was one particular instance where an Umbra managed to make it inside one of the ships. This is a brief snippet from the account of Navigator Unkli Nakis, who witnessed the event. Observing quarantine procedure, the officer of the watch ordered the pest destroyed and summoned stormtroopers to that end. No sooner had they opened fire than all hell broke loose. The creature was able to manipulate areas of darkness, drawing upon matter like oil from those zones of deepest shadow, the cracks between the bulkheads, beneath crates of supplies, even from the pupils of our own eyes. This assemblage of Umbros material was deployed in the most horrific fashion. A confluence of hooks, blades, teeth, and the like. Seeing a squad slaughtered and the barrage ineffectual, the commissar ordered a retreat and vented the hangar to the void. It would turn out that incidents like these were not particularly uncommon. There would be many reports of these creatures turning up in great quantities across the Imperium with alarming frequency. Most of the time they were easily dispersed, though at other times they would turn violently murderous. Entire ships have been lost to these shadowsmiths, satellites ripped apart, even planetary colonies engaged by shapeless dark matter entities, which only the mightiest weapons can harm. The only thing that truly seems to hurt them, or at the very least scare them off, is great quantities of light. But even that is a double-edged sword, as casting that much light on them creates shadows that they can manipulate. A single one of these spheres having the potential to create armies of eldritch shadow monstrosities and a hurricane of bladed limbs and snapping jaws. At one point, one of the Umbra was dissected in order to be studied. It was said to have a surface that was uniformly black, with a carapace temperature that remained at 10 degrees Celsius despite the application of meltabeams or liquid nitrogen. It had no obvious means of motion, yet in confinement would hover at about head level. It had no respiratory, digestion, or excretion tracts, and thus was determined not to be an organism in the traditional sense. After the scientists had completed their physical observations of the specimen, they decided to euthanize it by exposing its cell to a continuous blast of strong light. They sent in 6 illuminator drones, pre-configured to adopt evenly spaced positions around the subject. The illuminators were activated at full strength for a period of about 30 seconds, and the subject's body appeared as if it was brightening. It was in that moment that all of the humans that were witnessing the execution suddenly experienced intense cranial pain. They were assaulted by a barrage of mental images that depicted a vast humanoid figure splintering apart, scenes of a turbulent warp storm, deep space, and a single word pulsing through their minds: linger. As quickly as it began, the phenomena abruptly ended, and the dead Umbra dropped to the floor. The Umbra still have a lot of secrets, and the list of known facts about them is dwarfed by the unknown. But whatever they actually are, and whatever their purpose is, they clearly have a demonstrable warp presence and seem naturally drawn to areas that resonate with the warp, whether they be the hulls of void ships or suspected points of access to the Eldar webway. Calculus Logi Beer of the Mechanicus theorized that the Umbra were but a minuscule portion of extra-dimensional creatures. Inquisitor Maturin Raleigh speculated that they were innately hostile to human life and may be seeking to purge those species within the physical universe that caused the warp to become such a turbulent place. There was also the account of the admittedly confessed heretic Curto Salvador, who was burned at the stake after writing it.
Visited I was by the thirster in the dark, her who dance moans, her who keeps her secrets breasted, her who came upon me and told and told. Time before she was born, she told, time before all that. Wars in heaven and hell, star devils lock horns triumphant, and old gods killed away. Killed, she says, all but one. Hid away he did, up to his old ways, tweaking and dabbling, poking and prodding. She says, came a time when he's done his work, wants to hide and watch, always watching. So into the warp he goes. Then she's born in the long ear's brain, see, and she laughs out loud and chops him 1,000,000 times and kicks the shards out into the cold. To linger, she says, to linger like always.
If his account is to be believed, it would seem to insinuate that the Umbra are shards of a broken god, a broken old one. Specifically Ka, the one worshipped by the species known as the Hrud. This old one seemingly managed to escape the fate of his species at the conclusion of the war in heaven, before ultimately being shattered by Slaanesh during the fall of the Eldar Empire. But is this possible? Are the Umbra actually shards of an old one? Would it be possible for them to all come back together as an intact entity? Or is there something else going on here? There hasn't been a lot of information released on these guys in a long time, so it might be a mystery we unfortunately may never get an answer to. The Deep Warp Theory. Proponents of the Deep Warp Theory believe that the entirety of what we've been shown of the Immaterium so far in Warhammer 40K is nothing but the tiniest, most insignificant portion of it, and that much like how the oceans of ancient Terra were, the deeper you go into its waters, the stranger and more bizarre the entities you encounter. This is the realm of the Deep Warp, a kingdom built upon a foundation of rotting gods, the darkest, most turbulent depths of the Sea of Souls, an alien realm of psychic darkness where even demons and deities refuse to tread. To understand what the Deep Warp is, we can look at a real-world phenomena that takes place in our oceans each and every day, known as a whale fall. When a whale dies, its body sinks to the ocean floor. Their corpse can often create a hyper-complex localized ecosystem that supplies substance to a variety of different deep-sea organisms. It can take years or even decades for these carrion feeders to completely devour every last inch of the massive creature, until all that remains is a lonely and forgotten skeleton, and all of these entities slink back away into the black. Proponents of the Deep Warp Theory believe that much like the oceans of ancient Terra, the Sea of Souls works in a similar manner, that when a significantly powerful warp entity or great deity dies, its essence sinks deep beneath the turbulent tides into an infinite well of madness and insanity, whereupon it will be consumed by creatures so alien and bizarre, it's impossible to even attempt to describe them. There are some who like to point to the existence of the Well of Eternity as evidence that the Deep Warp is in fact real. It is said to be a vast receptacle of knowledge and arcane power, the center of all reality, the place where time and space originated and ended, a place that even the Chaos Gods are afraid to go to. The concept of the warp is not just a stagnant realm of infinite energy in every direction and has distinct areas to it, some vastly more dangerous, turbulent, or unknowable than others, is an idea that was commonplace amongst the Thousand Sons of the Great Crusade era. For the most part, they were told to stick to what they refer to as the shoals of the Great Ocean, and to never venture too deep, for humanity wasn't ready for that. However, the idea of the deep warp itself is not something that I have found within their writings. Most of the people who subscribe to the deep warp theory will often point to one particular passage where they believe it is mentioned in the novel The Path of Heaven by Chris Raitt. There are layers. There's stratum ethereus, the shallow ways. There is stratum profundus, the greater arteries. Plunging deeper, there is stratum obscurus, the root of terror. No living man can navigate the deep ways. Even he could not. It's not a mirror. It moves like a living thing. It is a living thing. Touch it and it trembles. I do not have the eye, but I still have seen things. I have studied what they study. The complexity is immortal. The seed is an ocean. All know this. It has currents, it has depths, it has storms. Near the surface, you can see the Cartomancer's light. You can follow it. You can use your Geller Aegis, and you are kept barred from the intelligences. But even then, you are just below the upper limits. Go deeper, and the Aegis shatters. The lights go out. The eye is blinded. When men say they traverse the warp, they boast. For no mortal does more than skim across eternity's face, like stones thrown by a child. We do not belong there. It is poison for us, and the deeper in, the worse the poison. It takes the power of a tormented sun just to puncture the shallowest shoals. No energy in our arsenal could possibly pierce further. String the reactors of a dozen battleships together, double their potential, and it still would not be enough. Although there does seem to be some evidence to support the existence of what we would consider to be the deep warp, it's important to remember that it's mostly just fan speculation. This is just a theory. There's just not enough concrete evidence to point to other than a few key conversations in certain novels. The idea of the deep warp is something that I would love Games Workshop to explore a bit more in the future, but I hope they never give us too many definitive answers. It would just kind of ruin the whole cosmic horror vibe this theory has going on. The mysterious disappearance of Arkhan land. The earliest mention that we have of the famous techno-archaeologist Arkhan Land comes from an old White Dwarf article where it was revealed that he discovered the STC fragments that contained the blueprints for the Land Raiders, meaning that, yes, the Land Raiders are named as such due to the man that discovered them. He was always just this obscure background character that no one really knew anything about, and just kind of served as a fun fact to know about Land Raiders. But that would all change in the Horus Heresy novel line, as he was a prominent character in several of the books and really came into his own. A lot of Warhammer fans, myself included, think he's an absolute treasured smart boy. I genuinely find him hilarious and charming. One of my absolute favorite inventions of his is a pet cyborg monkey. Now, monkeys have been extinct on Terra for tens of thousands of years, so he had to go off of their fossil records in order to recreate them. And he gave it a scorpion tail, because that's kind of what it looks like if you've just got bones to work with. When questioned about this by another individual who pointed out that their tail was probably prehensile and used to hang from branches, Arkhan Land said that was absolutely ridiculous. What purpose would that serve? Monkeys were clearly deranged and venomous predators. I f***ing love this dude. However, Arkhan Land unfortunately suffers from the same fate that a lot of 40K characters do, wherein originally they're just a little bit of background fluff, and then they become characters in their own right in the later novels. But that very first mention that we got of him didn't just tell us who he was, it told us how he died. As a techno-archaeologist, Land had dedicated his life to scouring the catacombs and tech vaults beneath the surface of Mars in order to recover fragments of STCs and pieces of ancient lost archaeotech from the Dark Age of technology. It was because of his efforts that the Imperium has access to some of their greatest technology. At one point, he led a 3-year expedition into the Librarius Ominous, which is an ancient underground library the size of a continent that stretches underneath the surface of Mars. It was here that he discovered not only the blueprints for the Land Raider pattern main battle tank, but also a universal land engine that would later become the basis of the Onager Dooncrawler, and patterns for anti-gravitic plates that would be utilized in the construction of land speeders, again named after him. In addition to this, he was able to map a region of the catacombs the size of a small nation. Now, despite his efforts, the vast library still had many secrets left to be uncovered. It was, however, years later, after the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, that Land would lead his fated second expedition into the library. He was never seen again, and only a single record of the expedition was ever uncovered. It consisted of a Vox diary wherein Land's panicked voice could be heard speaking about his team, how they were being picked off one by some unknown entity that was lurking in the darkness. I can't put into words just how dangerous of a place Mars actually is. There are all forms of mutants, rogue AIs, and unfathomable blasphemous machines that roam out in the wastes. And we can only imagine what ancient, unspeakable horrors dwell beneath its dunes. It's worth bearing in mind for comparison that Mars is indeed the planet where the Catan known as the Void Dragon is buried. I personally don't believe the Void Dragon had anything to do with this disappearance, as the Mechanicum book makes it pretty clear that it's contained, but it is worth mentioning as it sets a pretty dangerous precedent for all manner of horrifying entities of impossible power running loose beneath Mars's red sands. What ultimately killed Land and his crew is subject to limitless debate. Many speculate that it was some type of predator, while others claim it was a psychic entity, or perhaps even a sentient virus. Whatever the case may be, whatever ultimately is lurking deep in the dark, perhaps it is simply proof that the secrets of the dark age of technology are best left to the shadows of mystery and prehistory. What is written on the Terminus Decree? The Terminus Decree is one of the most sacred and mysterious relics in the entirety of the Imperium's history. It is said that at any given point in time, only a single person alive knows of it, and that each and every one of those individuals was a Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights chapter of Space Marines. It is locked away within the Chamber of Purity on Titan, inside of the tomb of Malkador the Sigillite, and is comprised of a single box with instructions stating that it should only be opened when the death of humanity is at hand, when the clock finally strikes midnight and the long war comes to an end. Now, what exactly the Terminus Decree is still remains a mystery. I mean, technically, there could be anything inside of that box. Some believe that it contains an artifact of great and terrible power that can summon a force beyond comprehension that will single-handedly destroy all of mankind's enemies, while others speculate that it is a device capable of purging the warp itself of all demonic influence. And most of these rumors center around it bringing salvation to mankind and paving the way forward for a new golden age. While these theories are certainly optimistic, as something that is severely lacking in the grim darkness of the far future, I'm not entirely convinced. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first is that if it truly was a device that would bring about the salvation of humanity, why wouldn't they have used it yet? Secondly, Terminus literally means the end, and the sigil that is inscribed upon the box can only be found in one other location in the galaxy, the Golden Throne. This has led many to speculate that it contains instructions for shutting down the Golden Throne, thus allowing the Emperor to end his long vigil and finally be allowed to die. The more hopeful interpret this as that since the Emperor is a perpetual, he would be reborn, rising up to push back the darkness and lead humanity into the future once more. But there are a lot of unknowns when it comes to the Emperor's perpetualness. Not all perpetuals are the same. Sometimes they respawn in only a short period of time in the exact same location, and other times they pop up somewhere else in the galaxy. It could take seconds, minutes, years, decades, or even centuries. With this information in mind, shutting down the Golden Throne could be an apocalyptic scenario. The Astronomicon would fail, cutting off all communication and warp travel. The Emperor would die, thus bringing down his protective psychic barriers around the Sol system. And not to mention Vulcan's doomsday device that is directly linked to the Emperor's pulse would detonate. If the Terminus Decree really is a Golden Throne user manual and details how to shut it down, then its use may be something as grimly simple as an option to let humanity go out on its own terms, a way of accepting the species' extinction with dignity. However, if we want to engage in a healthy dose of optimism, the Terminus Decree may be a set of instructions for the Emperor's revival. This would clarify why it hasn't been used yet, as the Emperor has supposedly been gathering his strength within the warp, and by all accounts is not ready to be revived yet. And considering that Malkador stood by the Emperor's side for thousands of years, knew more about him than any other person in the galaxy, with the exception of perhaps Erda. And most importantly, this relic is housed inside of his tomb and protected by the chapter of Space Marines that he created. The Terminus Decree may be instructions left by Malkador and entrusted to the Grey Knights on how to carry out their final mission. This would make sense, seeing that it was revealed in the Siege of Terra that the Grey Knights, although being created during the Horus Heresy, were not made to fight on Terra. They were made to fight a war that would come thousands of years later. There's honestly a billion different things that the Terminus Decree could be, so it would be irresponsible for anyone to try to make a definitive claim one way or the other. However, in doing research for this section of the video, I checked out the wiki page on the Terminus Decree in order to get their source list so I could read them for myself, and it made a pretty startling claim that the Terminus Decree was directly linked to the research of the mad scientist Basileau Foe. If you're unfamiliar with this character, he was a prisoner in the Imperial Palace during the Siege of Terra. During an interview with Euphrates Keeler, it was revealed to us that he was capable of creating an anti-Astartes phage that could kill all of the Space Marines and their Primarchs. Now, considering that the palace was at that very moment under siege by Horus and his armies, the prospect of such a dangerous weapon being unleashed was an option worth considering. It was ultimately decided that the cost would be too great, and thus the phage was not utilized, though Valdor kept the option on the table as a last resort. The novel The End in the Death Volume 1 seems to indicate that Malcador set in motion a series of events that would make sure this option would remain as a viable contingency plan long after his death, leading many people to believe that this is in fact what is written on the Terminus Decree. Full disclosure, I haven't finished the Siege of Terra yet, as part of doing a lore channel means I need to split my time between the Horus Heresy and more modern 40K books. I'm trudging my way through Mortis. It's not a bad book, but it's definitely the weakest Siege of Terra novel. And as of the time of this recording, the new Belisarius Call versus Fabius Bile book just came out, and I'm personally way more interested in that. Anyways, from what I've been able to gather, this is something that is only alluded to in that novel, but it's not directly confirmed. And if this really is what the author is trying to indicate to us, it changes what the Terminus Decree is all about, because wiping out all of the Astartes, both traitor and loyalist alike, would certainly be a massive blow to the galaxy, but the Space Marines are not the end-all be-all of the Imperium's military might. Likewise, chaos would still exist with or without the Despoiler's legions, and it would have no impact on all of the hostile Xeno species that wish to bring about the death of mankind. So this would change the Terminus Decree from being the end of humanity to the end of the Space Marines. It's certainly a possibility, but like I said, I'm not entirely convinced. I think it's more just a part of what the Terminus Decree is and not the end-all be-all of it. At the end of the day, we still don't know what the Terminus Decree actually is, and for humanity's sake, hopefully we never will. But what do you think of all this? What do you think the Terminus Decree actually is, and what is it eventually going to be used for? Do you think the Umbra are actually shards of an old one, or do you have a different theory? Do you think there's actually such a thing as the Deep Warp, or is this just a fan theory that's gotten too much attention? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. And let me know if you know of any other creepy 40K mysteries that you'd love to hear me talk about. I get my best ideas from you guys, and my favorite part about doing YouTube as a full-time job is having a constant group of people that I can nerd out about 40K with. Anyways, big thanks to everyone who supports the work that I do, and I will catch you all in the next one.